running through my savings account down to zero, and my wife's getting scared. You develop this sense of creativity, and the proverbial pivot starts to happen. And it's not as grand as some people think. It's just looking at what the market need is, and it's listening. It's listening to what people said. And
I mean, what was your thought process of that it was time to hire a CEO?
You can't manage what you can't measure. You can't manage what you can't see. So we went across that message of visibility. And over time, we started to expand and expand and expand. So I didn't need to be in Silicon Valley. I didn't need to be in Austin. I just needed to be in Houston.
Welcome to Forging the Future. And I'm sitting down today with a truly innovative cybersecurity company based in Houston, Joe Alapat, the founder and CTO of Liongard. Welcome to the show, Joe.
It's great to be here, Chris.
I love your jersey.
That's
Team Liongard.
Why not?
So you are a native Texan.
Yep, native Texan, native Houstonian. Been here since early 80s.
Okay.
So, yeah, born in India, but came here as quick as I could and never left.
So you grew up in A-Leaf. You got your Bachelor of Science in Computer Science.
Mm-hmm.
But then you were pre-med at the Med Center. How did that happen?
Oh, it's a classic Indian cliche. I needed to be a doctor or engineer growing up, so I always thought I would be a doctor. But then since middle school, I've been playing with computers and programming and gaming, all of that. And everyone told me I needed to go into IT, into technology. But then my cliche was holding me back. And, at Trinity, I was doing both. And finally, senior year, I made the decision. And under the advisement of people, I did internships at MD Anderson. And most of the doctors said, you should really go into technology. You're in the wrong place. And thankfully, at first I was a little stubborn, but thankfully I listened to their advice and realized along the way the reason I like computer science, I like technology is it's about building. That's really what it took. It took me about 20 years to figure that out. But I like building. I like building software. I like building companies. That's just, I think some folks are builders. Some people like to maintain and scale. And I just fall on the building side.
Tell me a little bit about that. I call that taking the red pill. You were a big corporate job, one of the biggest corporations in the world, right?
Yeah.
And you quit your job.
Yeah.
And went to work for a small startup, right?
Oh, yeah.
And were you married at that time? Or
No,
okay,
single. Right. And
so you could take that jump without having to settle a spouse down or anything.
I'd say, yeah, that's probably one of the least riskiest moves I made out of all the ones I made. A lot that were riskier later, but it was a big jump. I had some friends that told me, "Are you sure you want to make this decision?" But I was seeing what was going out, out in the world. One of my good friends is a founder of Rackspace, and he had, even in college, said this internet thing's going to be big, and I felt like I was not, in the middle of it, and so I decided to jump in, and it was an awesome decision. I learned a lot at Exxon. I got to see how the largest of the largest technology environments runs in corporate America, and so some of that is so relevant to what I'm doing now. So I think about that segue into then going to the smallest environment, and then going down the computer science route, and then along the way I ended up founding another company and joining another partner afterwards, and that was a company called Channel Dynamics. It's an IT service provider, and was also a software developer. So we called it a mini IBM Global Services. So we did.
And
everything.
How did that go? I mean, was that an exit or was that just a transition?
It's a reflection of. So I went out on my own and did independent consulting. Started consulting with this guy named Dave Brish. He was looking to also grow a company, so he and I, decided to make the company bigger, and it was a reflection of our own experience and capabilities. So I had the IT background and software background. He also had similar background. So we worked with mid-market companies, did software development for them. Over time, it was 2002 timeframe. We had three major companies decide, hey, we need some help on the IT side. We need to outsource IT. So we started doing IT services as well. So we did software development, managing IT for those companies, and that started to grow. And we thought we were doing something special around doing what is now known as managed services. And so we thought we were cool and new and innovative. And a couple of years later, we realized everybody kind of caught on this concept of avoiding doing time and materials up and down project work, but rather having an ongoing relationship to manage technology on behalf of your end customers. And that's what we were doing. And that was amazing. Learned a ton. Brought my good friend from fourth grade, Vincent, who's now my co-founder at Liongard, to that company as well. He did a ton of work with us. So we worked with, largest banks in the U.S., DoD, tons of major customers. And then we decided, after we sold the business, 2 more years later, said, okay, let's go start from 0 to 1 again.
Once more into the breach.
Yep, there it is.
And that was Liongard.
Yeah, and that's a good choice of words because the inspiration was around another form of breach, and that's the data breaches. And when we manage technology, I joke that I lost my hair running that business, that IT service provider. It was so stressful. Everything was on the line. So much risk that you're wearing, taking care of infrastructure for customers. And so seeing all of that risk, the thing that really blew my mind is why the technology wasn't keeping up with the changes that were happening. And so if you think about 2001 to 2014, there's just an explosion of changes in technology, from local data centers to co-location to web hosting to software as a service and AWS and Salesforce, mobile phones, all of that. Like all of this started happening. And guess what? We said, we'll take care of all of it for our customers. Never said no. But that experience gave us the ability to understand that technology management, the tools were falling short when it came to identifying security weaknesses and knowing how this growing surface area that was providing so much value largely is creating more risk for the businesses as well. And that seesaw effect is something we saw really early on. And so that pain that we felt was the inspiration for founding Liongard.
And Liongard is a cybersecurity platform.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, Liongard's really the core founding idea was, how do you identify the security weaknesses that would lead to a data breach? And how do you find them continuously? And so that founding concept early on is what we thought about in 2015 when we founded the company. And then finally in 2017, we brought the software to market, started working with one direct customer. And my first salesperson said, 2018, it was the lost quarter. We tried to message around security posture, and we were selling to MSPs, managed service providers, the group that we knew, and they just they weren't biting. They said, "Hey, this is great." So yeah, we need that, but talk to me later. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't a sense of urgency, and we were just shocked. And when we're running through my savings account down to 0 and my wife's getting scared, it's you develop this sense of creativity and the proverbial pivot starts to happen. And it's not as grand as, some people think. It's just looking at what the market need is, and it's listening. It's listening to what people said, and our customers or our prospects told us, you keep talking about this as if it's security, but you've actually brought back all of this information on these systems, and you can automate all this manual work that IT and security people do. And so I finally said, you know what, maybe I should listen to it. And we brought on a researcher, and she analyzed and listened to customers. And she even she said, "Look, I can't have you in the room when I'm interviewing them." I was offended. I'm like, why shouldn't I be there? And she said, "Look, they're not going to answer as authentically if you're sitting there." So I finally said, "Okay, fine." So she asked the questions. She came back and wrote this scathing report that basically said, Joe and Vin don't realize what they have. They actually have this platform that automates the documentation of IT systems. And I looked at that report, and I'm like, what? Nah, there's no way I'm going to be selling an automated documentation system. That just sounds silly. So I sat on it for about 2 months. And then finally, when my salesperson was so frustrated, it was like March of 2018, I just told Vin, I said, hey, man, can you just facelift the website and take off all the cybersecurity material and just say it's automated documentation for IT and security? And if you do web time machine on our website, you'll see it over about a 2 to 3 day period. Suddenly the website changed. And in about 1 month, sales started happening. And it's crazy. It's unreal. Like, it was just magical. Like, when you just listen, take the time to listen, and you just take that feedback directly and then just repeat it back, people started to pay attention. And my salesperson said, Joe, they're actually listening to this, because he was scared. He was like, Joe, I don't think I can sell that. But he tried it and it worked. And we landed our first customer, Ergos, here in town. It's a major MSP. And then from there, it started to build. And so that's where we started focusing on the visibility and understanding. You can't manage what you can't measure. You can't manage what you can't see. So we went across that message of visibility. And over time, we started to expand and expand and expand. And the use cases got crazy. And so it got bloated. And so it's interesting. This past year has been a year of transformation for our business, because I decided, we decided to recruit a new CEO. And it was an interesting experience. 6 months of recruiting, and brought a new CEO in, and handed the baton off in April. The first thing, she looked at the company and said, Joe, what you're selling, it's too wide. There's too many things that Liongard does for a customer. And so I asked her, well, what do you see? And she said, well, this cybersecurity focus around identifying the weaknesses and monitoring for changes, that's the idea. And Vin and I were like, well, we can get behind that. That's why we founded the company.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Having the freedom to make a decision to create focus again was really awesome. And it doesn't mean that we stopped doing those other things, but what was the primary reason why we built the company, and what's the primary source of value? And our biggest customers know our platform really well, and they'll say that. And we just chose to do lots of things. And so this past year, we've transformed the messaging to be back to cybersecurity focus. So this pivot way back that allowed it to drive our growth, there's a time to transform again. And this year's been another year of transformation.
Well, take me back a little bit to when you made a decision to do this polling of your customers, and you said there was somebody in your firm that did that.
Yeah.
Was that your decision? Like, hey, we need to go find out what our customers think, and in order for us to pivot and why they're not buying or what they feel they would buy?
Yeah.
Is that something you decided to do, or?
It's a good question, and I can't claim credit for it. And this is where it gets interesting. Where one thing I did understand, my dad has always been my biggest advisor, and I knew the value of having outside advice. So I was fortunate enough to find Station Houston in 2017, 2018 timeframe. And it was amazing. The number of advisors that would pop in there, folks like you would show up, and the advice that you would get constantly. And every single person said, "Look, you need to really get out there and listen to your prospects and your customers." Blair from Mercury Fund, he told me, "Joe, you need to stop hiding out in this office. You need to go sit in your customers' offices and you need to listen to them." And it's interesting. Finally, after like the 10th person said it, I said, okay, well, let's listen. So I listened deeper. And then I took another piece of advice from Richard, founder of Rackspace, that he had mentioned to me years ago. He said, we had a lot of luck hiring teachers, which was an interesting thing. He said that the culture at Rackspace was built around teachers coming in, and the experience with them was amazing. It was their fanatical support mentality. And so I decided, and there was a woman named Michelle who was at Station who had a teaching background. And so I saw her in one of the meetings, and I saw her presentation style and the way she was asking questions. And I was like, man, I need to get her to do the interviewing. So I was able to work with her, and she did the interviewing. And man, it was interesting. She has interesting style, asked the deep questions, and gave us back the feedback. And based on that experience, that's where this concept of our first core value at our business, listen and learn, came about. That's our first core value.
That's an important one.
Yeah.
A lot of founders need to understand that. I mean, that was the exact advice that the VCs gave like the Airbnb founders, right?
Hmm.
They're in California and they're like, well, where's your biggest market? And they said, well, it's New York City. And he's like, well, what are you doing here? You need to get out there, go talk to them, right? And so then they did. But I think a lot of founders haven't made that leap of like, oh, I know what, I built this product, I know what it is, I'm trying to
Hmm.
sell it, and then not being open to that feedback
Yeah.
from your clients, and then being willing to pivot toward that, even though you built the company to be a cybersecurity company. The second part I want to ask you
Hmm.
of your story, I think is really important from a founder perspective, is that you decided to hire a CEO. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of founders, hold on to that title with a death grip, right? And they don't understand at different points in their business they're maybe not the right founder. Maybe they were founder. I mean, to get something off the ground is one thing, to
Yeah.
transition it to something else. I mean, what was your thought process of like that it was time to hire a CEO for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. It's a, I'll be authentic with you. It's rough going as a CEO, and it's rough going. You have your tough moments, you have your exhilarating moments, and it's a roller coaster ride. And like everyone who was at the early days of Liongard will say that they lived multiple lifetimes. They've learned so much. We went through such hyper growth in the early days where we did a seed stage in 2018, a Series A in 2019, a Series B in 2020, and that was during the pandemic. Right, the world is falling apart. Had to do a capital raise, and each one of those times, there's money's running out and your runway, is running out, and you're looking at what's going on, and you're, the first two raises, as challenging as they were actually the easier. The third one, which was the Series B during the pandemic, was extremely challenging. While the financial markets were having struggles, but thankfully it was closed. So we had some amazing investors, and thankful that you're an investor as well, Chris,
Yeah.
during the seed stage, and the support that you've provided along the way. It's an awesome community here in Houston in terms of what I kind of consider to be our invisible army. And these are all the investors, the advisors who are around Houston, who are constantly checking in, or providing a connection, or providing a piece of advice. And so much of it is so timely. And I look back at all that advice and the things I sat on, I realized, oh man, I should have listened to that sooner. But the things that I did listen to, super valuable. And really early on, that working with advisors was so helpful. It's a phrase I jokingly tell Vincent, like, we need to get our advisors thinking about us when they're brushing their teeth. If we can get that that headspace, they're getting creative. They're thinking about things that will help us make leaps. And it was so helpful because I would get calls from JR. I would get calls from Heath Butler, and just our so many different advisors. And they'd say, "Hey, Joe, have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it this way?" And those things help you think through and make those leaps. But yeah, so those funding rounds are intense, and so you go through all this learning, and you along the way, like I'd say during the last, I would say 2022, the market was, if you're VC backed, you know what March of 2022 was like. Interest rates rose, access to capital went from like amazing to like near nothing. So it was an interestingly harrowing environment. Thankfully, our investors, TDF Ventures, Updata, as well as our original venture groups, Integrated Capital with JR, all of them supported us in an extension, and we continued to operate it and do some really good things. We reduced our cost structure. Thankfully, we had to make some tough decisions. And those that have done that well early on are reaping some of the benefits. And now I'm seeing some of the ones that sat on it for a while and struggling because the market has been rough for the last, I'd say, year and a half. And it has been a time of creating focus. It's been a time of, you'll hear a phrase of path to profitability. If you hear anybody, CEO speaking in the last 2 years, those words left their mouth. Hey, it's the path to profitability. That's what we're looking at right now. Why is that? Because growth, hyper growth at the cost of profitability was no longer the primary thing to think about. Now it's, yes, growth, but where is that path to profitability, and is it in the near term? And that, like all of this 0 to 1, kind of craziness and fun, it wears on you. And it's been, 6 years since we started the hyper growth, and it's been 8 years running the business. And so that's I had time to just kind of evaluate all of this, talk to my board, and we decided, let's go recruit a CEO. It's time, and I wanted to get back to focusing on the product. And so thankfully we were able to recruit a woman named Michelle Accardi. Super excited about her joining. She joined in April, and it's been quite a ride. It's been an awesome partnership, doing the handoff, and she's also very humble, willing to listen, really exemplifies our core values, brought a new core value, a sense of urgency, and focusing on that is a new addition she's made to our culture. And so it's humbling to do the handoff on the baton. It's scary. When the board asked me, okay, is Michelle the one? And I had to hold my breath for a moment, and we were recruiting her, and I said, yeah, she is. And then suddenly I just felt like I leaped off the edge of a cliff. I'm like, oh my God.
Again.
Yeah, I'm handing off the baby.
Yeah.
So you don't know what's going to happen next. And so far, so good.
That's great. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is such a, big decision to make at some point, to be more in the visionary seat than an integrator, seat or operational.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some founders don't think they'll ever not be CEO, right? But it's more common, especially in venture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point you can be replaced, right?
Yeah.
Whether you want to be or not. But it sounds like it was, a lot of it was on your decision to do that. And kudos to you.
Yeah. I mean, all of it. So our other core values, executing as a team. So our board, our advisors, a lot of them were also seeing what I was contemplating. And so it's, I look at that and I think about it as a joint decision. And I think about, the changes and transformations we all make right along the way. And this is awesome for the focus for the company. And it's great to bring a new CEO in. And so I'm focusing on the product vision. She's focusing on the company's vision and driving growth in new ways that I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's a good idea. Like, I should have done that. So that's great.
It's hard to do everything.
Oh, yeah.
What inspired you to reach out or connect with Station at the time? How did that happen, and how did it impact your business?
That's an interesting story as well. It goes back to my dad, my first advisor. And he told me in 2016, 2017, he said, Joe, this is not going to become a serious venture until you get an office. And I resisted it for a year. And I'm like, Dad, just leave me alone. I'm trying to figure this thing out. I don't need that cost. And he kept harping on me about this. And one day I was driving to hang out with my friends, listening to the radio, and there was an ad for Station Houston. And it was literally the night before my dad gave me the routine again on going to get an office. And I said, you know what, I just went to their website, filled out the form. They called me back. Next day I was there, and I got a tour of the place and ran into JR, and he walked in with his backpack, just trucked in. He's like, hey, what's going on? And did the introductions. And he said, so what are you working on? Give me the pitch. And so I pitched him, and about 3 minutes later, he says, Joe, I think that was the longest and worst pitch I've ever heard in my life. And then I said, you know what? I need to be here. I need to get this feedback. I was like, I'm just a glutton for punishment. And so I called up Vincent and I said, hey, man, I think I'm going to sign up at Station. And I think we need to be here because I see other people like what we're doing. I see them going through the same struggles. Let's do this. And it was awesome. This was at the older facility, the old Surge facility. We were probably one of the first people to sign up, maybe like the fourth or fifth folks. We were sitting next to the Graylog team early on and already learning a ton. And then we moved to the 1301 Fannin building. And
that was the top floor of the...
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cool
It's
space.
the trading floor.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it was an interesting space. And we had the cyber row where we had a couple of technology and cybersecurity companies that happened to be there at the time. So that was fun. And that's where we got to meet regular advisors and just it was, JR's concept of having collisions. And that's where this concept, where I really started to understand and appreciate the concept of network effects and why it's so critical to driving success and why it makes sense where when you create those network connections, it does create this sense of this invisible army that's out there helping you and advising you and urging you on for success. And I was fortunate because it felt like the waves were hitting the shore of the startup community in Houston around 2017, 2018 in ways that it hadn't in the past, where there were multiple attempts. There's been so many attempts at trying to do something in Houston. And I felt like it was like this kind of catalyst time period where I think it finally caught on to the level where there's been some momentum built and it's grown from there. And so timing was great. Timing is everything, they say. And we were in the right place to get the support of the community. So I didn't need to be in Silicon Valley. I didn't need to be in Austin. I just needed to be in Houston in the right spot. And that was awesome. That's where I ran into you. I ran into so many of the other entrepreneurs that I had no idea. I started to realize how many technology companies were in Houston, and I was connecting the dots, and it was obvious. But you just look around and you just forget because the city is so massive. And so once I started to connect the dots and getting the help from so many folks, the investors were helpful. We did the seed stage round, and I feel like I've got a who's who list of entrepreneurs and investors that are on the cap table from the seed round. JR introduced me to Will Rayner over at TDF Ventures. And it was a multi-month discussion. And, this is the classic situation of running to $1 million in annual recurring revenue, which is the magic number you needed to get to really have a reasonable Series A round. And worked with a couple of potential investors and ended up, it was TDF Ventures was the one that we closed with. And that was 2019 spring. And for some reason, I had to do it 3 years in a row. So after that, with that money, we grew and had another arc of growth. And then that's when 2020 rolled around. We were planning to do the raise. The world's melting down right in the middle of the raise. But thankfully, Updata Partners closed with us. And that was about late spring of 2020. So 3 years of capital raising in a row that probably put 10 years of life, 10 years of life on me. It was intense.
But that decision to actually go to Station got you not only the advisors and the mentorship, but actually access to the capital network.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty impactful.
And some of it's from Houston and some of it's, in this case, from DC. And that's why a lot of folks say, oh, there's not enough investment in Houston. There are not enough investors here. Well, realize there are investors here, and they were helpful for me, especially at the seed stage. And there's plenty of other opportunities, Series A, but the reality is it's a springboard to also give you access, across the U.S. I mean, global as well, honestly, through the network of folks that are here.
And is that why you specifically now decided to office at the Ion?
Yeah, I am a huge, and I can't say I'm as giving as you've been with the startup community, but I'm trying, and it's a big part of my DNA. I love working with other founders. I look at the Station Houston setup as a Montessori type setup where you learn from the founders ahead of you, you commiserate with the ones that are at your stage, and then you teach the ones that are a stage behind you. And it's called the Founders Dojo, and there's things that you chat about, and you learn the hard way. And so you really as a founder, you have this need to want to save someone the crisis that you experienced. And when you see it, you're like, look, I'm just going to give you some advice. I ran into the same problem. Here's what I learned, and take it or leave it. And those that have listened to some feedback like that have gained a lot. And I've received the same from so many other founders who've told me things like, look, if you're going to go for investment, just ask that next stage of investor what's critical to them. Find what those metrics are, find what the outcomes are, and then just work your way backwards. And it's as simple as that, right? And it seems so intuitive, but when you're in the thick of it, those types of just pearls of wisdom that you get, it creates clarity for you. And you really do need that clarity because you're in the middle of a tornado. So no doubt. I mean, that density, being in an ecosystem like what was there at Station, and now what's continuing to advance at the Ion, it's huge. And I see it in multiple places. It's not just at the Ion. I think the Ion's an awesome place. It's central to Houston. But there are other parts of Houston that are also having these little ecosystem centers that are there as well.
Like what?
The Cannon on the west side. I've seen that. Visited your studio, which is awesome. So got to chat with many of your founders. So it's great to see that. I mean, Houston's a city of cities, so you can't expect one place to be the thing. But that's great because people who are on the west side or northwest side or southwest side or central, they all have their place to go to. I do like the Ion being kind of a central location, and the venue is fairly significant. So they can host some pretty large events, and so that part of it is compelling. It's also a short commute for me.
Well, it sounds like you are giving back. You were telling me that you attended Cup of Joey.
Yeah.
This morning.
Yeah. Talked to a couple of folks who are, founders trying to start some ideas, did the LinkedIn connection thing. And, people want to get into the cybersecurity industry. It's just to me, like just giving back and just sharing the knowledge is something that it's just gratifying. It's just awesome just to do that. And it's just something that if you are sitting in an office by yourself somewhere, those opportunities don't show up. And so it just seems like you just need to be doing that, be part of the network, right? Create density and create connectivity for others. And then it pays itself back some other inadvertent way.
Well, that's where the luck happens, right? And those collisions that you said JR likes to talk about.
Yeah.
It
comes out of left field too. It's unexpected.
So if you fast forward, I don't know, however many years, Liongard maybe exits, what would be next for you? Well, I mean, it would probably be building again. My wife says there's no way that I would ever sit around and do nothing. But I would like to do something that's a bit more about giving back to the city. So there's some ideas, things brewing that, maybe that we'll have to see. Like if the opportunity comes up, I really want to think a little bit more about, being more intentional about giving back. And, my younger brother works with a homeless community in Dallas. My older brother is pulmonary critical care doctor at Ben Taub. So I feel like I'm the one that didn't give back as much directly. So I need to get some more bonus points. So yeah. But yeah, I think it's in our DNA to want to do that and be present in the community. And so that's something that I'll probably be more intentional about in the next round. So great to have you on, Joe. Really enjoyed the conversation. Really, encourage you to do exactly what you're planning to do, give back to the community, maybe be an investor, right?
Yeah.
So after you get that big exit, help these startups grow and pass on your knowledge. I do have some socks for you. Oh, man, socks. Love it. And, lion socks. So, try to be on point. Oh, my God. This is awesome, Chris. I will wear these proudly. There you go. So appreciate that. And thanks for coming on and sharing some words of wisdom. Yeah, no, I was happy to be here and learned a lot from you. So excited to be here and hope to be back sometime soon and share some more updates. Absolutely. Well, I've enjoyed watching Liongard grow. So go Liongard. Thank you.